Japan, 1969. Japan had just entered its 24th year of post-war occupation. During the late 60s, there was a lot more political unrest. Leftist student movements in Japan constituted some of the bloodiest and most dramatic battles between protesters and authorities anywhere. Student protests erupted at several Japanese universities in opposition to issues such as campus policies and the Vietnam War. Japanese student groups were fighting for a handful of causes, including education reform and land rights, but the stance they had in common was anti-Americanism. They wanted post-occupation Japan to be just that, and any lingering U.S. influence on their country was grounds for action. Student groups and miners were protesting a government that was seen by some as highly corrupt. 1969 also marked the release of a manga that would take these ideas of anti-authority, anti-establishment, and bring them to the forefront for young readers in Weekly Shonen King. This manga would come to be titled Wild 7, written and illustrated by Mikiya Mochizuki. The story of the Wild 7 reflects this era of Japan with its premise of a squad of motorcycle cops, where every member is a criminal that was given the go by the police force to be as violent as necessary to stop whatever criminal activity. The Wild 7 consists of their leader, incarcerated felon Hiba, anti-government radical Hiba-P, former Yakuza boss Oyabun, narcotics manufacturer Kashu, murderous former trapeze artist Sakai, fraud artist Hapiyaku, and finally explosives engineer Ryogoku. The Wild 7 take joy in their line of work blasting away criminals and go about it carefree, which gets them a lot of heat from law officials. However, due to their high rank in the law enforcement system, the Wild 7 are almost always above these law officials. The only person that has any power above the 7 is Kusanami, their founder and boss. The beginning of Wild 7 starts out as episodic stories about the Wild 7 going up against corrupt politicians, sleazy businessmen, and other criminals the police cannot touch. Each story usually tries to convey a message about relevant topics of the time. The antagonist reflects the issues of the time, and the pulpy, dirty world the Wild 7 inhabit reflects a more cynical side of Japanese society. By the time the Wild 7 appeared on the manga scene, Mikiya Mochizuki was far from an amateur in his manga skills. His experience allows him to put his skill into full force with some dynamic action sequences full of kinetic energy displayed in just one panel. There are many pages that display Mochizuki's blend of heavy impact yet lightness he conveys in his drawings. There's some great cinematic-esque art that complements the hyper-violent action beautifully. The weapons and vehicles are super detailed, and you get those classic old manga expressions. Mochizuki has a great sense of flow in his art that tells a whole scene in just one panel. His art takes full advantage of the medium and is comic storytelling at its fullest. Wild 7 ran for a whole decade, totaling in 48 volumes, to which only 6 were released in the West in English. Wild 7 sold over 8 million copies in Japan and is now regarded as a classic and has several museum exhibits showing off Mochizuki's art. The manga got to be so popular, Go Nagai even made a parody manga titled Mild 7. Mochizuki would go on to create several sequel manga. In order of release, there's Shin Wild 7 Beast Legend, Zokujin Wild 7 Yaju no Monsho, and then Hiba Wild 7 Another. The story of the Wild 7 manga would go on to be adapted into a highly rated 1972 live-action tokusatsu show by Toho, which received controversy due to the gun violence shown on TV, which was pushing the limit on what could be shown back then. There was also a short 2-episode OVA with some great animation that actually released in the States with an English dub. The other animated adaptation was made in 2002, but not based on the original manga, based on the sequel manga, Hiba Wild 7 Another. The most recent adaptation has been a live-action film released back in 2011, released by Warner Bros. Japan with a more modernized version of the story. To the dismay of many, Mikiya Mochizuki died at the age of 77 on April 3, 2016. He passed away just upon receiving his own exhibit celebrating the 55th anniversary of his debut as a manga artist. His legacy as an artist and storyteller will remain to this day, and the story of the Wild 7 will continue to be as timeless as ever. Wild 7 is a thrilling ride from start to finish. The artists complete unrestrained artistic creativity, and each of the characters have their little quirks and get the right amount of characterization to keep you invested all the way through. As the story progresses, the more you learn about the outlaws that make up the Wild 7. The Wild 7 manga is complete over-the-top shonen goodness and provides an interesting satirical insight of the state of Japan in the late 60s and early 70s. Wild 7 will continue to live as a timeless pop culture icon in Japan, and hopefully the word will spread and the rest of the world can enjoy the breathtaking escapades of the Wild 7.